Hello Year 11 and welcome to your Walking Talking mug for paper 2. Similar to what we did with paper 1, you have got a English language paper 2 cheat sheet. As you can see, it goes through how to answer all the questions as well, just to help you out, kind of think about structures and tips when writing your answer for this question. So, we're going to start straight away because this paper is always a bit longer and a bit more challenging, just because it's got two sources, not necessarily because of what the sources are about. Some pupils actually prefer the language paper 2 a lot more than the language paper 1 because they prefer non-fiction. So it's daunting because it's got two sources. We just need to remember that it's about taking your time, make sure that you have a bit of a strategy when it comes to the paper. Now, like we've done in the past, just make sure that you are always writing the centre number, the candidate number, your surname. Remember, this is your last name, and then your forename is your first name, and then sign in. Now, look at the bottom. It does tell you that you are advised. I'm just trying to make it so that you can see. It says you are advised to spend about 15 minutes reading through the sources and all 5 questions you have to answer. Now, again, like last time, I wouldn't necessarily spend 15 minutes reading through the sources first, but I definitely will go through all the questions that I have to answer. Now, very similar to paper 1, I once again would probably recommend doing paper 2 question 5 first, and that is because the bigger question. So at the beginning of the paper, like I said earlier, I would read through what I'm being asked to answer. Now, I should have with me the question paper, and I should have with me the sources. Now, I'm going to quickly, I always like for this one to have a quick look at the titles and where the sources come from. So I'm going to use a green pen so you can see a bit better, hopefully. Now, my source A is a 20th century literary non-fiction novel. So I like to get that out, I like to highlight it, and I tend to think, oh, well, that is a bit modern. I tend to write modern on my piece of paper. It doesn't mean that it's massively modern. It still will be maybe really old for you. And it says Morning Glass, an extract from Mike Doyle's autobiography published in 1993. Now, like I said, you guys weren't born in 1993, but it's still a bit more modern than the other one. I was 6. Now, source B, 16th century non-fiction, 19th century non-fiction, not all the way to 16th century. So I'm going to highlight this, and this I'm just going to put here a bit old. Now, I know when it comes to stuff like from the 19th century, straight away Dickens comes to mind, and I can see that because it says the Hawaiian Archipelago, an extract from a letter written by Isabella Bird, published in 1875. So can you see, like, we've got a modern source and an older source, and that would be the case always. One of the things that they tend to say that is if in your paper 1 you had a 21st century source, then on paper 2 you will have a 20th century and a 19th century. Now, if in paper 1 you had the 20th century source, you will have a 19th century and a 21st century. The 19th century source tends to always appear in paper 2. So it's just a nice bit of knowledge to be aware of. Now, I'm not going to read the sources first. I think it's really important that I get to know the questions and I start to figure out which questions require what sources. And I like to do this actually myself on the front of the insert source. So I tend to write question 1, question 2. So I just get that ready. Question 3, question 4. Okay, and what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to make sure that I know exactly what sources I should be using. Okay, so looking at the at source 1, so I'm going to start with question 1, and I always like to read this. I know what I need to do for it, but it's good to start getting my ideas ready. So it says, read again the first part of source A. So I'm going to highlight that, and it's source A, and I'm going to actually write on here source A, okay, because that helps me, and I'm going to tell you why in a second. It says from lines 1 to 13. Okay, so I'm going to go to my source. I need source A, so I'll double check just in case You never know, and I need ones line to 1 to 13. Now, notice the way that when they have an odd number that doesn't follow the going up in fives, they always tell you where to go. So that is for my question 1. Okay, so I'm labeling that ready. Okay, so let's have a look. Choose 4 lines 1 to 13 true statements. And I know that I've done it loads of times, and I always need to remember that I need to make sure that I need to shade the circles. I need to always remember that. Okay, now let's look at question 2. You need to refer to source A and B. Now, I always know this. I know that that's the case. Both sources describe the types of boards. Also, this is about the types of boards used for surfing. So, I'm just going to go to the front of I'm not going to read the source yet, of course. But I'm going to put that for this one. I need A and B. Okay, there you go. All right, let's go to question 3. So, I'm going to go to question 3. Now, it says here, you need to refer only to source B. So I'm going to look source B, lines 18 to 25. How does the writer use language to describe the surfers and the sea? Okay, so let's quickly go to source B. So let me see, question 3. I'm going to put here B. And then I need to look at lines 18 to 25. 18 to 25. It's a very short bit there. Look at that. Beautiful. That's going to be great. It's very easy. That's question 3. Okay. And then I go to question 4. And now I know that for question 4, it's always both sources. I'm just going to read just in case one day they change their minds. So it says, and for this question, you need to refer to the whole of source 4A and the whole of source B. Okay, so I know that. I need to go A and B. Compare how the writers convey the different perspectives. So how do they convey the different perspectives on surfing? So I always like to rephrase this question. So how they feel about surfing. Okay, so I need to be looking about how they feel about surfing. What do they think about surfing? I always like to get that ready. Think about surfing. Okay, so that's literally what that question is asking me. Okay, so what do they feel? How do they feel? Fantastic. And now I'm going to go to the end of the paper, and I've got my paper 2, question 5. Now, like I said, I probably would go for this one first. But if I'm struggling, I might do the reading section first in case the source gives me some ideas. Now it says here, all sports should be fun, fair, and open to everyone. These days, sports seem to be more about money, corruption, and winning at any cost. Write an article, so I'm going to highlight that. I need to write an article for a newspaper. Okay, so that's like, it tells me a tiny bit about the audience, I suppose, a newspaper, an adult audience, in which you explain, oh, that's not just my point of view, your point of view on this statement. Okay, so that becomes important because I'm going to get that ready actually. So for this question, I need to write an article. So I'm just looking at the question and making sure that I know what I'm doing. My audience is probably adults because it says newspapers, and adults tend to read newspapers more than children. The subject, what's the subject? All sports should be fun. All sports should be fun, fair, and open to everyone. These days, sports seem to be more about money, corruption, and winning. Okay, so it's about sports for all, not about money. Now, depends how later on when I'm doing this question, I decide whether I agree or disagree with the statement, and then the purpose is to explain my point of view. Now, of course, there is going to be a walking talking mock for question 5, but one of the reasons why I tend to recommend that you do question 5 first is because you probably have got an opinion on this statement, whether you think sports should be fun, whether you think sports are corrupt. You probably can already write an article that answers this question. So I tend to go for this question first. So I've gone through the paper, I've gone through the questions, I know what I'm meant to be doing on each question, which lines I'm using. And one of the reasons why I encourage you to do this as you read and you find out what question needs what is because when you go and do that question, you can check that you've got the right source in front of you and you're reading the right source. But also it's about the strategy that you use when answering the paper. So for example, now you may disagree with this, you may not want to do it this way. After I do question 5, I tend to do question 1 because that uses one source. And then I tend to do question 3 because that uses the other source. Now for question 2, I have to read the whole source. And for question 4, I have to read the whole source. So I tend to do question 4 first because that is the one that has got the most marks. It forces me to read the whole source and then I leave question 2 last, but I've already read the whole source, so then I probably can find the things that I need to find a lot quicker. Okay, so this gives me, by knowing this, it gives me a tiny bit of in which order would I answer the questions. Now my preference is 5, 3, 1, 4, 2. Okay, that's my preference, but remember, it's your paper, you do it how you feel the most comfortable doing it. Okay, so that is just going through the paper. I'm going to do question 1 and question 2 in a second in a different video. I hope you found that helpful.